Silver is surging, and as of right now, silver is at, as per JM Bullion, that's who I use, $80.27. Gold is at $4,800.57, but gold to silver ratio is a little over 60.5 to 1. What we're going to talk about today is why Paris is the biggest silver story of the week. And right now, as you watch this show, something extraordinary is going on in Paris. Something that every single person holding silver, watching silver, or even thinking about silver needs to understand before today is over. Because today is not just another day. We have a lot to talk about. Now, Paris matters because Macron is actually doing something crazy, in my opinion. Now, the Straits of Hormuz, which is 20% of the world's entire oil supply, moves through that narrow corridor of water between Iran and Oman. 20%. That means every tanker, every barrel of every shipment of liquefied natural gas that powers factories, homes, and industries across Asia and Europe passes through the waterways that is of today under a blockade. Not particularly disrupted, not slowed, blocked. And when a waterway that critical gets cut off, the shock waves do not stay in the oil market. They move fast into every inflationary sensitive asset on the planet. And nothing is more inflationary sensitive, and nothing has historically absorbed energy driven inflation better than silver. Now, here is a little detail about Hormuz blockade, and I'm going to explain it the best I can. Where today's summit becomes the most important geopolitical event of the week for our community, people that collect silver and gold and commodities in general. Now, President Emmanuel Macron of France and UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer are co-hosting what they are actually calling a strict defensive multinational Navy mission. The goal is to it's really simple and enormous, complex to execute. Reopen the Straits of Hormuz without escalating the existing conflict between the United States and Iran. Between 50 and 40 nations are reportedly involved in these talks. 15 to 40. It's a big swing there, but they don't know. They're not telling us much anyways, I'm sure. Now, that is not a small coalition. That is a potential reordering of how the West and its allies respond to the waterways crisis. And it is happening today, right now, in Paris. The Americans have already launched their own naval operation. The U.S. presence in the region is real and it is active. But what Macron is offering is a parallel path, a diplomatic and defensive corridor that gives the international community a way to protect global shipping without turning it into a direct U.S.-Iran military confrontation. Now, that distinction is enormously important because if Macron succeeds, you could see a partial easing of the energy disruption that has been turbo channeling inflation into the precious metals market. And if Macron fails, if this summit collapses, if the coalition fractures, and if the blockade holds, then we are looking at an energy crisis that analysts believe could accelerate silver trajectory towards and possibly through $100 level that we already touched earlier this year. Now, silver was sitting at $35 right around June of 2025. Now it crossed $60 by the end of 2025, and it hit towards the end of January 2026, $120. Now, the speed of this move is not random. It is the direct reflection of the world where energy insecurity, geopolitical fracture, and safe haven demands and compressing what would normally be a multi-year price journey into a matter of months. And peace talks, they collapsed. The negotiations, not happening. They were being hosted in Pakistan and diplomatic back channels that many analysts were pointing to as many of like off-ramp for this crisis. Fell apart, no deal, no ceasefire, no framework, just failure. And the market responded instantly. Silver climbed 1.8% in early trading as of this morning. And as we talked, it's over $80 an ounce again. To be clear about something, because this is where a lot of commentary is going to give me maybe a little piece of their mind. The Paris mission is not just a geopolitical story. It is a silver story, and that's how I'm going at it. Here is why. Every time a major energy choke point gets threatened, the market has to reprice the cost of producing everything. Silver is in solar panels, electronics, industrial manufacturing, medical field, military purposes. When energy costs spike, production costs spike. When production costs spike, the available supply of silver gets more expensive. And just for bringing it out of the ground. And simultaneously, inflation fears drive retail and institutional investors into hard assets. So you get a demand surge at the exact moment you are facing a supply cost squeeze. That is what we are living through right now. And the Paris summit is sitting right at the center of it. Let's talk about who was there so far that we know of. There's 15 nations that have been confirmed and active participants in these talks, this so-called summit, with a potential to expand to 40. You have European heavyweights, France and UK, leading the charge. You have Asian economies that are completely dependent on Hormuz oil flows. You have Gulf states that have their own complicated relationships with both Tehran and Washington. And you have Macron, who has spent the last 3 years positioning France as the indispensable diplomatic bridge in exactly these kinds of crises. This is his moment. Whether it works or not, this is what the Paris mission was designed for. And that brings me to something I want everyone to watch and to think about carefully. The market is not waiting for the summit to conclude. The market is pricing in the uncertainty right now. Now, with it over $80 an ounce of the pricing process, if the summit produces a credible agreement and the Hormuz message begins to reopen over the next 2 or 3 days, maybe the next few weeks, you could see a short-term pullback in silver as some of the risk premium comes out of the trade. But even in that scenario, the structural drivers, industrial demand, solar expansion, currency concerns do not go away. They just go a brief longer. I believe it could slow a little bit before it hits 100, but I think if it hits 100, it is possible 200 isn't far away if this continues. If the coalition cannot hold together or Iran refuses to recognize the legitimacy of a multinational defensive mission, or the U.S. operations and the Paris mission end up working at a cross purposes and creating confusion in the waterways, then the energy premium stays in the market. The inflation story intensifies, and silver, which has already shown it can absorb enormous institutional buying pressure, continues its climb. This is why the Paris mission is not just the biggest silver news of the week. It is potentially the biggest silver catalyst of the quarter, because it is a binary event within systematic implications, and both outcomes, success and failures, keep silver in a constructive price environment for different reasons. Now, before we continue, if you have been finding this information to your liking and you'd like to come back, please do subscribe and hit the bell notification for all. And hit the like button too, please. Now, the $100 silver scenario, energy inflation, central banks, and the next leg up, silver moves before the mainstream financial media catches up. Now, we cover these real-world connections between geopolitical and precious metals every week or so. And being part of this channel means you get the context before the crowd does. The community watched it happen as it rose to $120 an ounce silver, and then the pullback. Are you going to be sitting on the sidelines and still not have any silver in your bank or in your safe deposit box? Or I prefer to have it in my own possession. I don't recommend any silver derivatives or fake paper silver at all. But the Hormuz blockade being active with peace talks failed so far, with Macron and Paris trying to hold together a coalition of 40 nations. The analysts, who are calling $100 a prospective extreme, are having a very different conversation today. The energy-led inflation argument for above $100 for silver. Hormuz blockade extends beyond 60 days, and we are already past that threshold. Some estimates global manufacturing begins to reprice their cost structures, not just for oil, but for everything oil touches, which is everything that you purchase in just about every store. So shipping costs are going to matter. Now, chemical inputs, agricultural products, and an inflation becomes entrenched rather than transitory. Central banks face a dilemma: raise rates hard and risk a recession, or tolerate elevated inflation and let hard assets run. In every historical precedent where central banks have chosen the second path and have often chosen it, well, silver has been one of the primary beneficiaries. That is the macro backdrop against which the Paris mission is playing out today. Macron is not just trying to reopen the shipping lane, he is trying to prevent a global inflation spiral and the silver market, consciously or not, is better on whether he succeeds. Let us talk about what success actually looks like. A credible Paris agreement would need to accomplish several things simultaneously. It would need to establish a multinational naval presence in the Straits that Iran recognizes as non-hostile, a defense corridor, not a military blockade of their own coastline. It would need to get enough of the 40 participants in these nations to actually commit ships, personnel, and political capital, not just show up for the photo opportunity, which I believe that's all they're doing, and then quietly backing out. And it would need to somehow run a parallel with, rather than in conflict with, the national naval operation that is already active in the region. That is an incredible complex diplomatic achievement. But Macron has done complex before. And Starmer, whatever you want to call him, standing next to him today signals that the United States or the United Kingdom, post Brexit, post AUKUS, is willing to put real political weight behind this European led initiative. He is the specific dynamic worth watching as the day unfolds. The signal will not come from the official press conference language, which will be carefully crafted to project confidence regardless of what actually happens in that room, but from the number of nations that commit to active participants versus passive support. If you see more than 20 nations sign on to this defensive mission framework with concrete commitments, that is a genuine achievement, and the market will likely reflect it. If the number stalls below 15, or if key Asian participants quietly abstain, then the coalition is more symbolic than operational, and the Hormuz situation remains unresolved. Silver understands this, not because Silver thinks, obviously, but because the traders, the institutions, the central banks, and the informed retail buyers who move the silver market are watching the same developments you are watching right now. They are pricing Paris in real time. And the fact that we opened this morning right around $79, 1.8% climb tells you that the market right now is pricing in the world where the Paris mission is not a guaranteed success. What you are seeing in silver today is the price of uncertainty. It is not $100 yet because the market believes there is still a chance that diplomacy works. But is it not $60 anymore? Because the market knows that the risk environment has fundamentally shifted. The floor has risen, and the ceiling is being actively debated. For those of you who hold physical silver, coins, bars, allocated accounts, today is a day of pay attention, but not to panic in either direction. If you have been waiting for confirmation that your thesis was correct, here is your confirmation. The global disruption that makes silver is a critical safe haven and an industrial necessity is not a theory right now. It is live, and it is in Paris. And the price is over $80 an ounce. For those of you who have been on the sidelines, waiting and waiting and waiting, watching, the question you need to ask yourself is whether silver will ever pull back again. Or it definitely will. I mean, we all know this. But at what point? Every asset does. Is it going to go to 150 before it pulls back to maybe 120? Is it going to go to 200 before it pulls back to 150? Or could it pull all the way back to $25? I highly doubt $25 we're ever going to see again. There is no inventory. Look at the LBMA. Look at the COMEX. Shanghai has already said, we're not selling this. You're done, Western. We're not selling to you anymore. And they're very low on supply as well. Now, these talks collapsed in Pakistan on Tuesday morning, and where the French president has to fly and 40 world leaders to try to hold global shipping together. In that world, what is silver worth? Macron's Paris mission is not the end of the story. It is a chapter in a much longer narrative about what happens when the post-2008 financial order, built on a cheap energy, global supply chain stability, and dollar dominance, begins to crack under the pressure, real-world events. Silver is one of the few assets that sits at an intersection of all three of those cracks at once. Industrial necessity, inflation hedge, alternative currency. And today, with the summit happening live, with the Hormuz blockade holding $80 an ounce, flashing on every screen in the precious metals community. All three of those stories are active simultaneously. So here is my question for you. And I want to see this in the comment section. Given everything happening today, the Paris summit, the failed Pakistan talks, the U.S. naval operations, and silver already up almost 2%, where do you think silver closes tonight? Are we looking at a close above $85? We'll have to see. But thank you for stopping in. I do appreciate each and every one of you. I'm trying to build a show, and I think certain things with YouTube are holding me back. Don't know what they are. But if you can help out, I do appreciate it. God bless and have a great rest of your day.